In a relative sort of way.
Tina and I and the rest of the Granny Brigade would like to thank you all for coming, and especially our guest speakers, Scott Hill, Steven Howe, Pat Proctor, and Caryn Tyson. And before we get started, I want you to all silence your phones. And we'll start with the flag salute, and then we'll have a prayer by Pastor Carlin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray to get started. Heavenly Father, we sure do love you. We thank you for another beautiful day that you've given to us. Thank you for the rain that you've allowed to fall on us as well this past week. I pray that you'll bless us tonight, give us wisdom, give us discernment. Lord, for our representatives who are here tonight, I pray that we will get some answers and we'll get some understanding from some topics that they are going to speak about. Most of all, God, I pray that our country, that tonight's meeting, that we will all be honoring in your sight. Bless us, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Before we get started, I'll tell you the little rules that we have. As you came in, they gave you a pen and an index card. And instead of taking questions from the floor, you will write your questions on that index card, and we will have members from the Granny Brigade pass a basket around, and you'll put your index card in the basket, and Chad will read the questions to the speakers, and they will answer them. And anybody gets out of hand, we will ask you to leave, and if you don't leave, then we'll have you escorted out. Now, as the speakers get started to speak, we are going to pass a basket around for donations to help pay for our expenses for tonight. Any little dollar that you want to put in the basket would sure help us. And if you didn't pick up a flyer when you come in for our next month's meeting, there is some flyers back there for our next month's meeting. It will be at the Friendship Center, and it will be a former Border Patrol agent talking about sex trafficking and human trafficking. So be sure to pick up one of them before you leave. Is there anything else, Tina? Okay, Scott, would you like to start the meeting off with any topic you want to talk about?
Okay. It's on. Hey, it sounds like it's working. Well, you know, I'm a little bit of a student of history, and I think a lot of times it gives us perspective on the present and where we're at if we look back to history. And so this is a really important year that we're in right now as we look at our country being here 250 years. And you realize a year from this July 4th, we'll be celebrating your 250th year of the Declaration of Independence. And the people of Kansas, when the state of Kansas was formed, borrowed language from the Declaration of Independence to do the preamble to our Constitution. And it says that we believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, what do those things mean? And why do we, as legislators, run for an office to be able to protect those things. And one of the things that's important to remember is that the pursuit of happiness refers to the ability to spend our money as we see fit. And so what we have seen over the last decade in Kansas is that the increase in the size of the state government is hampering the amount of money that people have left in their pockets to spend as they see fit. And so the robustness of our economy is totally dependent on us reducing the growth of government at the state level, just as they work at the federal level to rein in the excessive growth there. And so one of the most important things we can do is trim budgets, cut waste, focus on programs that are effective, and quit trying to do everything for everybody. And we started out, we got a good start this last year in doing that. For the first time in a significant period of time, we actually reduced the size of the budget instead of increasing it at above the rate of inflation. And so that's a start. It's not the end, but it's where we need to be heading. And so it's great to be here. I thank you, Grannies, for having this. I represent Dickinson County and half of Marion County and just a little tiny bit of McPherson. And I appreciate everybody being here, and I will pass the mic so that Steven can talk.
Thank you, Representative Hill. It's a pleasure to work with you in the Kansas House of Representatives. Great to see an awesome turnout tonight. Appreciate everybody's taking the time out of their evening to be here, even though, you know, there's a beauty in the diversity of thoughts and perspectives, and I've seen that up in the Kansas House of Representatives. There's people from all different corners of the state. Some represent geographic challenges. You've got rural and urban issues. You have all sorts of different things and perspectives being brought to the table. So I'm one of 125 members of the Kansas House, and we have to govern. The Republicans are the governing majority, and so that is our duty, is to govern. And our biggest priority is to pass a balanced budget each year, which we successfully did. And we did reduce the budget by over $200 million in this next fiscal year. So we're making some headway. I do have some handouts of the State General Fund budget profile. I think it's good information for everybody to have. I probably didn't get enough copies printed for this evening, but I will pass that around. You might not see it in the news media being reported on, but even though we've reduced spending, we're still projected to spend over $600 million more than we're bringing in revenue. So we're deficit spending, but that is because we have a surplus. We've enjoyed a surplus, and that's going to give us a cushion for a few years. But if we continue at this rate of spending, we're going to exhaust that surplus pretty quickly. So I'm thankful that the Speaker of the House appointed a special committee on legislative budget. We're starting the budget process earlier, and this fall in September, October, that committee will meet. And I will begin working with my colleagues to hear from different agencies, hear what their needs are, and then it'll be up to the legislature to make some recommendations and set some priorities. So these decisions that we have to make aren't done lightly, and we have to come together to govern and produce a product that will be, I guess, reflective of the priorities that you all give to us as your legislators. So I'm thankful to be here, and thankful to be out of session. This session was condensed. We did a 90-day calendar session, which we're not necessarily required to because it's an odd number year, but the state constitution in an even number year says we cannot go past 90 calendar days. So if you look at the calendar, we're not working on Saturdays and Sundays. So if you exclude all the weekends and maybe some of the federal holidays and state holidays, I think we were in session like 56 working days this past January, February, March. And so we got out a little earlier this year, and I think next year's calendar is set already. And so we're going to hit the ground running on day one with a budget, and we're going to dive right into it. So I'm going to turn it over to Representative Pat Proctor, who came all the way from Leavenworth to join us today. And he and I came in as freshmen together in the Kansas House. It's a pleasure to have you here.
So hi, I am Pat Proctor. I serve the people of Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, and a little town called Kickapoo in the Kansas House. But I'm here today because I serve you as your chairman of the House Elections Committee. I made the decision to continue serving you, running to serve you as your Secretary of State. As the chairman of the Elections Committee for the last 3 years, I've tried to do two things because we've got a crisis of voter confidence in our state and in our country. And for the last 5 years, we haven't been having a discussion or a conversation about elections. We've been having a shout match. And so what I've tried to do is, the chairman of the Elections Committee, is create a platform where we're going to have a civil conversation about elections and about people's concerns. And so sometimes I'll tee up a bill. I have no intention of moving out of the committee just because it's a great conversation piece to get people in to share their concerns with us. And you know, folks will come in and they'll tell us what they're concerned about. Sometimes I totally agree with them. Sometimes I don't agree with it. And they get to calmly explain what they're concerned about. If I don't agree with them, I'm going to ask them questions. If I agree with them, you know, the other side's going to ask them questions because they probably don't agree with me. But we're going to have a conversation. And then after they sit down, the folks that don't agree with them are going to get up and tell us why they're all wrong. But they're going to do it in a civil manner, and we're going to have a conversation. Because people want their concerns to be heard. They want to have a place where they can actually speak their mind and not be shouted down and called tinfoil hat wearing crazies or accused of stealing elections and trying to let non-citizens vote or whatever. And it's crazy, but a lot of the videos of those committee hearings are actually viral videos. It's crazy to say, but it's true because people across the state are so hungry to have a conversation and have their concerns heard. And sometimes they come in and they voice a concern. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That is something we should address. And when I'm not in the legislature, I teach in the Homeland Security program at Wichita State. Kind of the first principle of Homeland Security is you don't wait till after the plane blows up before you stop the bomb from getting on the plane. And in the Army, we call it getting to the left of the boom. I was 25 years in the Army. And so if there's a vulnerability and we can fix it without making it harder to vote, and it ain't going to cost a gajillion dollars, let's just fix it so we can address people's concerns and we can bring people back into the process. A lot of the stuff that I've worked on as a chairman of the Election Committee is just about increasing transparency, making sure that the results reflect the will of voters, and make sure that people see us doing the counting and see us checking the count to make sure that the counts are right. I've also been really involved, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about it, in combating non-citizen voting by putting some laws and some mechanisms in place so we can actually check and make sure they're not voting, and we can assure Kansans no, non-citizens aren't voting. Also combating ballot harvesting, by making sure that the votes that are being cast are, cast by willing voters, and that the folks are actually expressing their will, not being coerced in any way. And finally, fixing our voter rolls. Because I don't know how Saline County is, but I know how Leavenworth County is. When I go and I knock on doors, you go to a door, and on the voter roll that you're looking at, there's the 2 voters who live there now, the voters lived there before them, the voters lived there before them. So I've been working to create some mechanisms to take folks that have passed away off the rolls, but also folks that have moved, get them off the voter rolls so that we know that everybody in the voter rolls is a valid elector in the state of Kansas. I'd love to talk about any of that or whatever else you want to talk about, but thank you again for inviting me to be here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, good evening. I'm Caryn Tyson. I represent the 12th Senate District over on the eastern part of the state. It's 8 counties. I got to tell you, though, I feel like this is home, and many of you know why. I was raised in Glasgow, family in Salina. In fact, I see a few people from Glasgow, so it's great, and a lot of faces from Salina that I know. So thank you very much to the Granny Brigade for inviting me. I got to tell you, I think I met him first at a meeting in Kansas City area, but then I was driving by on the highway on I-70, and there was a bunch of people with flags standing up and waving on the viaduct. And I went up there, and it was these good ladies, and they were waving the flags and supporting our veterans and our military service. So thank you very much. I do see a few military in the office, or in the room, and sheriff's office. I know I don't have the right who you guys serve, but thank you very much for your service and for being here. I get nervous when I speak, so I'll just tell you that. You guys, we have done some really good tax policy. Now, the media wouldn't tell that. Fake news, right? We have passed some major legislation. Is there anybody in this room who has not filed their income tax yet this year? Okay, thank you. So you all should know, no state income tax on Social Security. None. We can remove that completely. And it's a team effort. Nobody does one thing up there alone, but believe me, I was fighting for the last 5 years to get that done, and we were very glad to have it across the line. Also, what we did last year, and you may not have realized it, but you should take a look. We've always talked about increasing the standard deduction, and yes, we have increased that for a few years. But last year, what we did was we increased the personal exemption. So that means whether you itemize or not, you got a tax cut. We increased it when you file your income taxes. It went up from like $2,250 to over $9,000 exemption. So if you're married filing jointly, it was an $18,000 just off the top of your income tax. And then we increased the personal exemption for dependents to $2,350. That was a major income tax cut, and they said it was for the rich. I guarantee you the rich didn't care about that $9,000 or that $18,000. But the low income and the middle class, they cared about it. It made a difference on their taxes. In fact, my aunt's CPA from Salina, or accountant, said you call your niece and tell her that they did a good job on that policy. So it was a team effort, and we thank everybody, but we worked hard on it. I worked very hard on it. I'll tell you what else. So income tax, we passed another bill this year. If we keep growing government, then if with inflation, and we have so much in the state bank, then we automatically cut personal income tax. And we cut those continue to cut until they get to 4% growth. That's the way we're going to stop growing this beast called government. Because right now it is out of control. You heard some of the speakers. We are spending more than we are taking in, and it has to stop. So income tax, we've taken care of those. Move on to sales tax. How many of you heard axe the tax on food? That wasn't our motto, that was somebody else's motto. But what we did do was we removed the state sales tax on non-prepared foods. We did do that. So when you go to the grocery store, you will see a difference. You should be seeing a difference now. If you're not, talk to your grocery store, check the receipt, call us, email us, let us know, because it went into place this year. So sales tax, we've made some changes there. Let's move on to property tax. We all know that's an issue, right? And they say, oh, you didn't do anything. Well, I'm going to embarrass Sean. Will you stand up, Sean? No, you guys, we need to thank Sean. We have been working with him, and he came to us a couple years ago, came to me, and asked for help on legislation to remove property taxes on ATVs, electric wheelchairs, golf carts, electric mopeds, bicycles, that type of stuff. It's personal property items that it was costing them in some instances more than they would collect in property taxes. And in a lot of instances, people weren't filing or following the law on it. So Sean was absolutely right, and let's give Sean a hand for working on that. We would not have got that passed. It's a team effort working together, and I know he works very hard for you. So we also, on property taxes, a couple years ago, a state representative came to me and asked me if I would consider legislation that increased the homeowner's personal exemption. And I said, well, sure, I'll look at it. So I put a bill in to exempt it for $100,000. And everybody's like, oh, that's crazy, Caryn. What are you doing? I said, I'm trying to cut property taxes. So what we did was we negotiated in the tax committee, and we ended up with $40,000 increase for inflation. That had not been increased. That 20K exemption that you get on your home for the 20 mil K through 12 had not been increased since 1997, since inception of the legislation. So the next year, the House comes back and says, we like that idea, we're going to add to it. And so it went back and forth, and we negotiated, and we got it up to $75,000 last year. So that exemption, so that was a decrease to your property taxes. People kind of forget about this. Had a fairly large fiscal note. We worked together, we got it into law. So this year, the Senate, for a couple of years now, we've looked at a constitutional amendment that would limit your taxable valuation. Not your valuation on your property, but how much you're taxed at. And it was a constant value, 3% or less. So it would limit what you would be able to calculate and kind of anticipate. You couldn't tell what the mill levies were going to be the next year, but you would at least have an idea of what you were going to be taxed at on your valuation. We passed it. We've passed it for a couple of years now. We sent it to the House. The House decided, that wasn't quite what we wanted. But you're hearing in the paper that we're miles apart. We're not miles apart. We both passed constitutional amendments to deal with your limitations on your tax value. How is that miles apart? The House passed a rolling average, an average. They didn't define the years in the constitutional amendment. And so we're going to try to convince our colleagues, let's go with a simple, constant value that everybody can calculate. But then they're going to try to convince us, let's go with a rolling average. So we're going to figure this out, guys. We're going to get it passed, and you're going to be able to vote on the Constitution, a constitutional amendment that will help. It doesn't stop property tax increases, but what it does do is creates more certainty and transparency with the process. Because in order to collect more money, local governments will have to raise the mill levy. And you'll know who is raising your property taxes and why. That's what it's about, right? Transparency, taxation with representation. That's what we're fighting for. And you'll be getting your letters in September, August for your revenue neutral rates. Pay attention to those. You get them mainly in August. It tells you on that letter what taxing authority is planning to increase your property taxes from the previous year. That's the only notice you get before you get your tax bill in December. So you want that warning, you want that letter, and you can go to the meeting because it states on the meeting before the local authority votes on it. And they get to hear from you. It's in statute. If they don't follow the law, you can challenge it, and then they have to remain revenue neutral from the previous year. So it is a good process. Is it a little bit, it's complex, but I say property tax has a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables. So we're just trying to force transparency and to force local control so that you know what's going on. You guys, I look forward to your questions. I could talk tax all night. Granny and all these guys know. But I do appreciate you. Don't hesitate reaching out. If you have some ideas, we're open to suggestions. So, and since we're Q&A, I'll bring up the first hot topic. We did pass a constitutional amendment on allowing voters to decide whether we elect our state Supreme Court justices or whether we keep the current system. I've been writing about this for a few weeks. I'll give you there's a few reasons why you would want election because of the current system. There's a really good book out there, Justice Scalia Speaks, and he gives a lot of speeches on this topic and our Constitution and how that's supposed to work. I'm going to tell you one of the reasons I'm supporting this effort. In Kansas, a few years ago, there were individuals that were charged with identity theft. They had stolen somebody's social security and were using it. They were illegal immigrants and they had stolen identities in order to get a job, okay? Well, they broke the law, a couple of laws, federal and state. And when that case went to, they were charged and prosecuted, and it went to the Kansas State Supreme Court, and they overturned it and said, no, these illegal immigrants cannot be charged because it is a federal issue. Thankfully, our Attorney General took that to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Can you imagine what a slippery slope it would be if illegal immigrants wouldn't be prosecuted like you and I? That's not fair. So that's one of the reasons I'm supporting the ability to elect justices so that we can decide. I look forward to your questions, and thanks for being here tonight.
There have been baskets passed around, and there were some cards that were handed out when you came in. You can jot down your questions on there. We have lots of questions, so thank you already for those who have come up with those. If they start speaking and you have another question that pops in your mind, just raise the card up, and I know some of you want to be anonymous with that, that's fine. But we'll take the basket, let you drop it in there. But we have several to get started with. So we'll start off with, this one is specifically for Representative Hill. You were talking about the waste in government. Would you list a few or be specific about a few items that you would consider to be waste in the government?
Thank you for that question, and a few might be too restrictive. Let me talk about something that just came out this last week that you may not know about, that there was a mistake in the calculation of Medicaid payment through KDHE. And for 9 years there had been no oversight over that, and they had continued to distribute more money than entities were entitled to. We need to run a tighter ship as a state. And we have a number of things. Let me give an example. When we go to the county treasurer every year and renew your vehicle license, what purpose does that serve? There's no inspection. We don't check to see whether the vehicle is safe to drive or not. The only thing that we're doing is causing an employment for a number of people to take your money, send it into the state, and the state spends it someplace else. Let me give you a third one. The low-income housing credits that we had in the state. We projected that the growth of that program was going to bankrupt the state within about 10 years. Why was that happening? It was because when we were building apartments for low-income housing, the cost of those apartments was over $250,000 per apartment. Now, I understand that you want a high-quality apartment that will last, but you could build somebody a complete home for $250,000. So these are examples, and we can go into 100 others. I can tell you about at-risk funding. My specialty is education. We've had 2 legislative post-audits on at-risk funding. At-risk funding in education is designed to help those children that are likely not to succeed in education. And what we have found is that at-risk funding is being spent primarily on increasing salaries instead of focusing on increasing the amount of instruction that is going to those children. And so if we know that at-risk funding, if spent correctly, makes a difference in kids' lives. But what we're seeing, and this is not a small amount of money, it's about $600 million that we spend on at-risk funding. And we cannot show any increase in student performance across the state because of that. And so if we're going to spend that kind of money, we need to see results because of it. I know there's other people that want to talk on waste in government. I can talk to you about the waste that I see in education. I can talk to you about waste that I see otherwhere, but it is obvious that when we have a 70% increase in the state budget over the last 6 years, that we need to turn that around.
There are several questions about Medicaid expansion, which has been in the news over the last, I don't know, several years, I guess it has been now. And I'm going to group some of those together in just a moment, so just giving you a little preparation on that. This question is specifically, and it doesn't say specifically to one of you, but I'll open it to all 4 of you here tonight. If the state is going into budget deficit, why did legislators vote to give themselves a raise? And Scott, you answered that last one. Maybe start on the end. Ms. Tyson, would that be?
So I tried to block it too. Legislators did vote themselves a raise, and then the bill had that we could block it by a resolution. So I started a resolution, co-sponsored the resolution, and then we tried to pull the resolution out of committee because they buried it in committee, and we could not get the votes to stop it. So I know that a comment was made that we only work during the week, and I saw one of the eyes roll in the audience, and I thought, you know, what he's saying is, yeah, we're only in session during the week. He's not telling you how much we work outside of session. I can guarantee you, my emails are flooded, my phone calls, we work. I mean, you know, we're after hours. Most of us have a job. We're a part-time citizen legislature. And that's what we do, is work, and I'm proud to serve. It's an honor to serve, and I ask for this job. And anytime I start to be frustrated, I just remind myself, I asked for this position, and I'm glad to be able to be a voice, a strong voice for Kansans that aren't always heard.
So I also voted against the pay raise, and I'll tell you what I told my fellow legislators when I stood up there on the floor of the House and lost the vote. 2 things. First, our framers very, very wisely put that 90 days into the Constitution and limited us to a certain number of days to be in the legislature passing laws. It does 2 things. First of all, it keeps us from being up there all year spending your money and thinking of new ways to spend your money. But I think just as importantly, if not more importantly, it forces us to go back to our districts and work alongside the people that we serve and have to earn a living right alongside them and you know, hear their concerns and live the same concerns that they're living. It makes us better legislators. That we're not professional legislators. We're part-time citizen legislators, and we have day jobs that we do most of the year. The other thing that I said to my colleagues is, if you make this a profession, if you make being a Kansas legislator a profession, you're going to get a whole different kind of person in Topeka than the kind of people that we have in Topeka now. You know, I told you earlier, I spent 25 years in the Army. Some of the greatest people that I ever got to know serving in the Army. And I had a picture in my head because I had no idea I was ever going to be in politics. It was not my life plan. If you want to make God laugh, tell me your plans. And so now I'm a legislator. And I had a picture in my head of what the people were going to be like in the legislature that I got from CNN and Fox News and from my local news. And I'll tell you, some of the best people I've ever known are the people that I've had the privilege to serve with in the legislature, because they're just like us, because they are making the sacrifice of public service to go up there and serve us as our legislature, and then they go home and they work right alongside us. And I'm just the same way. And I voted against the pay raise because I was afraid that if we made it too lucrative, and I'll just tell you, it still ain't lucrative. When I go off to Topeka every Monday, my wife tells me, you're costing us a fortune. The other day, when I was doing my taxes, the accountant said, you need to quit teaching, you need to quit legislating because it's costing you a fortune. And I looked at my wife and I said, did you tell her to say that? But we're not making a lot of money even with the pay raise. It costs more money for me to go up there and spend the whole week there than the amount I make. But it's a public service, and I'm honored to do it to serve the people I serve and to serve the people of Kansas. And I'm just afraid if we, if we do make it too lucrative, we're getting the wrong kind of person up there with the wrong reasons.
Sure. I'll try not to rehash. So this process started. Legislative pay's been too low for too long. So leadership decided we're going to draft a bill to create a commission independent of the legislature to study legislative pay. Built into that bill, they would make a recommendation to the legislature. If we didn't act within so many days, it automatically became law. And so the first version of that I supported because I thought, yeah, we need to look at this, and having it independent of the legislature would be good. Then it came back from the conference committee. Well, in conference, between the House and the Senate negotiators, language was added to give pay raises to all the statewide office holders, the governor, lieutenant governor, the state insurance commissioner, attorney general, state treasurer, on down the line. And they just decided what that pay was going to be in the conference committee. And I said, well, that's not what we were starting off doing. So I voted against it because I thought, that's not what we started to do, and to peg statewide office holders their pay to what a member of Congress makes doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you guys as well. Probably needed to be looked at, but I think it needed to be done in the light of day. So that's why I voted against it. And earlier when I said about us being in session 56 working days, I didn't want to insinuate that my colleagues do not work hard. They work very hard, and it's so condensed that you can see the exhaustion on their faces at the end of the day. Conference committees going late into the night, and so I am proud to work alongside many of them. And I'll turn it over to you, Scott, if you had anything else.
I'll add just a little bit to that. The question, going back to the question said, you don't have the authority to bring down the state budget because you voted for a pay raise. That's basically what it said. And I want you to look at these four people up here. They all have the authority to bring down the budget because every one of them voted against the pay raise. And so I think, the assumption's made that we are a bunch of fat cat legislators that want to take away money from everybody else and give it to ourselves. And I think you need to understand the sacrifice that legislators make. It is hard work. It is mind-numbing work, and it never ends. It never ends. You don't go home and walk away from the job. The job follows you wherever you go, whether it's through email, whether it's through text messages, whether it's through phone calls that come at midnight. I mean, this job follows you always. And the main reason that it really follows you is because you care. And I know each one of these colleagues up here truly and deeply care about people, about the state of the government, about the state as a whole. And I'm really proud to serve even with those that voted for the pay raise, but none of them are here tonight.
This question, I guess, is for all of you, and it may be a quick answer. So if so, I don't know if there are any quick answers with I'll leave that alone. This question says, are deportations happening at scale? And I'm assuming they're talking deportations of illegal aliens. Are deportations happening at scale in Kansas? Are any of you aware of that? Go ahead, Representative.
So I could say something tangentially about it. So Leavenworth, my city, is a prison city. In my district, I've got Fort Leavenworth, which has the military disciplinary barracks, and I've got the U.S. Penitentiary with 1,400 guests of the federal government. And then right down the road, we've got the Lansing Correctional Facility. And we used to have a facility, well, it's still there. We have a facility in our city. It's just outside my district, like by like less than a mile, called the Leavenworth Detention Center. And the purpose of that facility used to be for federal prisoners that were awaiting trial over in Kansas City. They were housed at the Leavenworth Detention Center, and the facility was run by a company called Core Civic. So last year, in March, I think it was like February, March, the Biden administration finally started doing something about immigration. And they had all these folks that they needed to hold until they could get status, which basically meant a show trial so that they could get refugee status so that they could live in the country legally. Because when they would pick somebody up who'd committed a crime, they didn't know what to do with them. And so that was their solution. But they didn't have any place to hold them. And the Biden administration, the beginning of the administration, had passed an executive order that said that private prison companies couldn't hold federal prisoners, which had shut down Leavenworth Detention Center. So all of a sudden they've got this problem. They've got folks that they're finally starting to round up because it's election season, and they don't have any place to put them. And so they came to Leavenworth County, the government of Leavenworth County, and said, hey, we'd like to contract with you to hold them, and then you can contract with Core Civic to be the contractor, and then they can run Leavenworth Detention Center to hold all these, to house all these illegal aliens until we can get them status and they're free to go. As you can imagine, I didn't like that plan very much because those folks would get once they had refugee status, if they had been looking out the window at Leavenworth and thought it was a great community just like me, they could say, well, I want to stay here. And they could walk right out the front door, and then we've got to take care of how many illegals decide to stay in Leavenworth. So I screamed bloody murder. I got as many of my neighbors as possible scream bloody murder, and we shut that down. So fast forward to January. Finally, January 20th, we're going to do something about the border, and we're going to shut it off, and we're going to round up all these folks, there's 20 million folks that have flooded our country. And we got to do something with them too. And so the Trump administration asked Core Civic, because the first thing Trump did, or one of the 100-some executive orders that he filled out, was overturning the Biden administration's ban on private prison companies. He asked DHS and Core Civic to reopen the facility so that we could hold all the detainees that they're picking up until we can get them on a plane at Kansas City International Airport and we can get them back to the country that they came from. I love that idea. I love that idea because it brings back the 300 jobs that Biden destroyed when he took office and he signed his executive order. I like that idea because that facility right now, because it's dormant, is barely paying any property taxes. It'll be paying about $2 million more in property taxes, which will lower the property taxes for all the homeowners in our county and in our city. I love that idea because I want to get rid of all these illegal aliens that came to this country illegally and are have no legal right to be in our country. And so, of course, as you can imagine, some of the folks who feel the same way as some of the folks in this room have sued to stop the Core Civic from reopening this facility. And they've done it through our city government, because our city government's controlled by Democrats. Our Democrat mayor is suing to stop Trump's plan to deport all these illegal aliens. I think they're going to fail. I think they're going to fail because the way they're trying to do it is they're saying that CoreCivic needs a special use permit because of some ordinance that CoreCivic had already been exempted from. But they're going to go to court in June, and I'm pretty sure they're going to fail, and CoreCivic's going to open. And I am thrilled that my community is going to be a small part of fixing the 4 years of disastrous open borders. And while I'm at it, let me tell you some of the things that came with those open borders. Last year, or 2 years ago, our police responded to 48 fentanyl overdoses. A dozen of them were fatalities. It's getting more lethal. This year, they only responded to 38, but 11 of them were fatalities. And so all the stuff that came with all this illegal immigration, I'm ready to see it all go. And like I said, I'm thrilled that my community is a small part of the solution.
Several of these questions are personal, and I like that. People are getting their perspective. And so several of these questions have to do with the state's plan to cut the budget, to reduce spending. How is that going to affect me personally? How is that going to affect us? And the first one I'll ask you to address is, how is that going to affect or help farmers in Kansas? I know that's a wide open question.
I'm looking down the table. I think I might be the only farmer up here.
I'm a rancher.
You're a rancher. See, that it was farming specifically. I think the thing that we need to focus on is what makes America great. What has made America an economic powerhouse for almost 250 years? Was it government subsidies to farmers? Is that what made our country great? Was it welfare that made our country great? Was it tax abatements to foreign companies to come into our state? Is that what made America great? No, it's not. And so farmers are great because they have innovation, they've had technology, they've had hard work ethic. They have been the ideal for the world. And Kansas farmers have in many cases been the ideal for our country of hard work, ingenuity, continuing to do what they do and do it even better when they don't make any money. Those types of things are what make America great. And it's not the subsidies. I'm a farmer. You can look up on the internet somewhere that I've gotten subsidies in the past. And I say, yep, I have. I give every one of them away. I could care less about the subsidies. That's not what makes us great. What makes us great is freedom and opportunity. And that's what will make us a great economic powerhouse again. And I'm excited to live long enough to see the change that's coming in our country, to encourage entrepreneurship, to encourage hard work, to encourage people to put businesses up, to encourage people to take risks. That's what we need to make our country great, not subsidies and handouts.
I don't want to jump in too soon. If
So,
somebody else
no,
wants to
you're
answer.
fine. I'll just address a little bit of it. So how is it going to impact you when we cut waste and fraud out of the state government budget? Well, if you're committing waste and fraud, it's going to impact you. Otherwise, you're not going to notice it. Then the money is going to start getting to where it needs to go with the programs. I'll give you a couple examples when I first started the legislature. We were being charged by OITS, OITS, whatever you want to call it, for every jack in the Capitol, $23.50 per jack. Now that's government charging government $23.50. If there's a jack in every committee room, every seat, Every office has at least 3 or 4 jacks on the floor. I mean, there were a lot of jacks in the Capitol. So I requested a legislative post-audit on this because as an IT person, somebody that's a software engineer, I thought, wow, can you imagine paying $23.50 in your house? So they do a legislative post-audit on this. Guess what they find? OITS is just charging willy-nilly. They're being fined by the federal government because they're not charging accurately, and they're overcharging some departments and agencies. They were fined over $2 million. Then we look back a few years after that, they're being fined again because they haven't changed their process. So we cut the fraud, the abuse, the waste. That's how we take care of our state budget. And believe me, there's enough of it in there. I got to tell you, I put in a bill last year and I couldn't get it out of committee, but I'm hoping as more people realize there was a legislative post-audit on HPIP. And there were people from Salina that came and testified, don't pass the bill, we get this tax credit. Well, this tax credit is for businesses, corporations, and from 2018 to 2020, they handed out $3 billion in that tax credit. Now, these companies can sell the tax credit. It's transferable. There's a website. You can go look. You can bid on them. They can carry it forward for 16 years. So I look back because I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So about every year, they're cashing in about $300 to $350 million of these tax credits. Now, we don't know how much of it's the $3 billion because nobody's tracking that. So I've requested another legislative post-audit to look back at where we're actually at on these tax credits. Now, this isn't fraud and abuse, maybe, but let's take a deep dive at it and look at it. We're talking real money here. And this money could be used to help Kansans to lower state income taxes. Because think about it, if we weren't handing out those tax credits, we'd have more revenue coming into the state. And the bill that we just passed this year, with more revenue coming in, we get automatic cuts for individuals. So it just makes sense. Let's not pick winners and losers with government tax code. Let's just make a fair and level playing field so that everybody has a chance, and let's get it done.
I don't want to jump in front of you guys. I believe all of you have mentioned, if not directly this phrase, but you've spoken about it, fiscal responsibility within government. How can you reconcile or justify fiscal responsibility when we decrease revenue and increase spending to the place where we will find a budget shortfall? I believe it was mentioned within 3 years. Could we have an answer to that? Representative Howe.
Thank you for the question. So the chart I have here is based on the consensus revenue working group. They issue an estimate of projections for revenue in the spring and the fall. And so those are based off of certain assumptions. And so it's a conservative profile that would suggest that if we continue at the current rate, there could be these deficits in the future. Now, things could change. You know, it could be an unleashing of economic activity, which we would all hope for, and that we could avoid these deficits. But nonetheless, there's definitely evidence that we need to, I suppose, reposition state government for the 21st century, really. And we're already a quarter of the way through this 21st century, and we need to look for ways to do things differently. If you look at the last census, we only had growth in about a handful of Kansas counties. We grew about 80,000 people compared to the last census. But even in the most recent census estimates, it shows places like Saline County still losing population. Now, I don't fully agree with some of these estimates. I think maybe there's an undercount, especially with COVID. There was a lot of people that were just kind of going off grid, being non-responsive. They were not feeling very trustworthy of their government at the time. So I think there was an undercount. But nonetheless, for example, I chair the Higher Education Budget Committee. In the state of Kansas, we have 6 public regent universities. We have 19 community colleges. We have 20 independent or non-for-profit private colleges. That would be your Kansas Wesleyan University. But we have less students going to college than ever before. So is this sustainable? And that's a big question we're going to have to wrap our arms around. I know there's a student in here that's probably in the class of 2026. The class of 2026 is going to be the class that's going to be, has been termed the enrollment cliff. It's going to be one of the smallest graduating classes statewide in our history. We've also experienced the lowest birth rate in Kansas history since we started taking vital statistics in 1911. These are alarming trends. We need to look at our demographics now because it's going to affect us all 20 years down the road. Other countries are going through similar shifts in population. China, European countries, low birth rates for a long time mean bad things down the road for social safety net programs and things that people count on. Social Security, for example. All the workers that are out there working in their jobs, paying their payroll taxes, or paying for the current beneficiaries. There's a trust fund, but it's all on paper. You don't have money set aside in an account. It's all an IOU. And so I think we just need to look at ways that we can become more efficient. And it's going to be a tough political battle because we've got members that represent a lot of community colleges, a lot that represent some of the regent universities, and it's going to be a tug of war. But I think we need to find some common ground for how we can create efficiencies. One example is Fort Hays State University got in a mutual affiliation agreement with North Central Tech up in Beloit and Northwest Tech in Goodland. They mutually agreed that this was the best path forward for that western part of the state, northwest Kansas, north central Kansas. And it's been a great thing so far. So we need to look for innovative ways to move forward, and it's going to be better if people do it mutually and see the mutual benefit rather than us as a legislature stepping in and mandating it, because that's where it's going to get really nasty. So thank you.
And I'll build upon that with this next question. The Republican Party has had, according to this question, a supermajority since 2010. So why has government grown out of control since that time?
That's a loaded question, so I'll take it. You know, I think what you have to look at, and you're, the writer of the question is absolutely right. Republicans have had the ability to trim budgets for a long time. I don't know the exact year. And the truth is they haven't had the will to do that. And there has been a shift in this country. And I don't know if you feel it in Salina, I don't know if you feel it in this room, but we realized that continual growth of government and the movement to a socialist state has not worked anywhere in the world, and it's not going to work in America, and it's not going to work in Kansas. So saying that we did things we shouldn't have in the past, absolutely right. Does that mean that we can't do better in the future? It doesn't. And I think you have a legislature right now that is committed to reducing the burden on taxpayers. I think we have shown that for the last 3 years. I've been in the legislature 3 years. I think each of those years we have focused on reducing the burden on taxpayers. And we have reached the point that we need to cut the waste out of government. We need to reduce the size of government to continue to be able to foster the kind of growth that we need through giving people opportunity and reducing the burden on them. So, good question. I appreciate it, and we're doing better.
And I agree with everything Scott just said. I just want to go back to the kind of original question as you framed it. First of all, you know, if you're counting R's and D's since 2010, I don't know, I guess we've had a super majority. I haven't only been in politics since 2020 when I was first elected, because I was in the Army 25 years. But it hasn't always been that all the R's were R's. You know, for a long time in this state, there's sort of three parties. There were conservatives, moderates, and Democrats. But the other thing I'd say is the reason that our budgets continue to grow is forever, as a legislature, the governor gave us a budget, and we used that as our starting point for our budget. And whether it's a Democrat or it's a Republican, the governor is in charge of the executive branch of the government. And so the governor can do more with more money and more people, and can do less with less people and less money. So if you start as your entry argument to your budget process, the governor's budget, and you're whittling away at whatever he or she is giving you, you're probably going to be starting from a high spot and trying to go down. This year, for the first time, and my hat's off to Speaker Dan Hawkins for doing this, he committed to a new process where we're not going to start the governor's budget, we're going to start with our own budget. And it was crazy because, you know, the governor vetoed a bunch of stuff in our budget and said, they're going to blow up the budget, we're going to have deficits in a couple of years. Well, we came in tens of millions of dollars under her budget. So what would have happened if we had just done her budget? That's what I would have liked to know. But I think that this process where we start with what do we need to do as a government, instead of justify more money every year for your agency, is the way to do it. And you know, we like I said, we came in, I think it was something like $47 or $50 million under the governor's proposed budget this year, and we're just getting started. I can't wait to see what next year is going to look like, because now we've got a process. The first year we were kind of building the airplane in flight. Now we've got a process, we've got the committees in place, and I'm really excited about what's going to happen with the state budget next year.
All right. Several questions about Medicaid expansion, and you guys had to know that was coming tonight. I'm trying to consolidate some of these. Many of these are kind of repetitive, but with the federal, it looks as if federal funding is going to be removed from the, or cutting part of the funding for Medicaid. What is the state's plan for supporting Medicaid, specifically in rural areas, rural hospitals, that type of thing?
Okay, so my district, Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, is one of the toughest Republican districts in the state. I'm the first Republican re-elected in my district since 1994. I just did the three-peat. And I'm always a nationally targeted seat. The National Democrats always pour money into my seat because on paper it's vulnerable. And every year we get the new Democrat candidate and they come in and we got to expand Medicaid. We got to expand Medicaid. And people hear it, but they don't know what that means. And so let me tell you what that means. Medicaid is for the elderly and the disabled and for little kids and for people that are very impoverished. And when Obamacare was written, they wrote into the Obamacare this plan where if states wanted to expand Medicaid to cover able-bodied adults, working-age adults that could work, that make under a certain amount of money, the federal government would cover 90% and the state would only have to cover 10%. And so every year in my district, I have to stand in a forum and I have to listen to my Democrat opponents say, oh, we're leaving money on the table, billions of dollars. Like, you know, Joe Biden had a big bag with $2 billion on his desk he was just waiting to send to us if we'd expand Medicaid. That was all going to be additional debt, right? But now Kansas looks really darn smart because what we said was going to happen if we expanded Medicaid is now happening. The federal government can no longer afford this expanded Medicaid that a lot of other states did that we didn't do. And so now they're changing the terms of the agreement. It ain't going to be 90-10 anymore. It's going to be 60-40. And all those states that expanded Medicaid and ignored all the warning signs are now going to be on the hook for 30% more of the bill than they were told they were going to be on the hook for. And Kansas is not going to have to suffer any of those consequences because we didn't expand Medicaid. We kept it to what the original vision for the program was: taking care of the elderly, taking care of the disabled, and taking care of impoverished kids.
So some of this is actually a lot misleading. When the term expanding Medicaid is used, they're talking Obamacare. They're not talking about getting people off of the wait list and helping those in need. Because if they were, they would be talking about what the legislature has done for the last 2 years. We have expanded Medicaid. We just have not accepted Obamacare. We have decreased the wait list for the state of Kansas for those in need. We have increased the amount of funding that is going to help pay for that. So let's be accurate when we talk about this. They want Obamacare. We want to help those in need.
Does anybody have an update on school vouchers, is this question? On the state level, I'm assuming.
Well, I'm going to give you an update on school vouchers nationwide, because there's no news on the state level. We had no bills this last year. There were no votes taken. There is a few savings account, tax credit bills floating around that never got passed. So there really wasn't much news on the state level. On a national level, more and more states are going to school choice of some form or another. And there's a reason for that. The reason is not that these nasty old Republicans want to destroy public education. The reason is that we have a failing education system. And estimates in Kansas are that 30% of children graduate from high school that are functionally illiterate. That's not acceptable. We don't have good data to say how many are functionally math illiterate, but it's probably worse. The truth of the matter is, we are not doing the job of educating children that $12 billion should do. Now, does that mean that we have to have vouchers tomorrow? I don't see that that's going to happen. But I do see that we need educational reform that results in changes in the outcomes that come out of our school system. We have been working on reading, okay? For about 7 years now, there's been a change in the way we teach reading. And we focus pretty hard on it. We put some money to it. We're educating new teachers on how to teach reading. Have we seen any changes in reading performance? Unfortunately, we have not. There are reasons that we're not seeing the educational performance we should see. Some of them are happening in the school, some of them are happening out of the school. I've been a sponsor of a bill for 3 years, I believe now, that would eliminate cell phones from the schools. We have not been able to get that passed. We didn't even get a committee hearing on it last year. And yet, all of the research shows that not only is it affecting student performance, it's even more importantly, it's affecting student mental health. You know, the excuse is brought out that we are a local control state, and so we shouldn't mandate from the state level no cell phones. Okay, great argument. Are we a local control state when it comes to establishing funding? Are we a local control state when it goes to establishing standards for academics? Are we a local control state when it comes to allowing guns in the school? I don't think so. All of those things, we say these are important enough that we need to stop it across the state. We need to do that with cell phones too, because I guarantee you that they're just as dangerous as having guns in schools. Oh, I heard some laughs over here. The mental health aspect and the suicide rate amongst young people that are addicted to their cell phones is alarming. And, you know, we can laugh about it if we want to, but I think it's pretty short-sighted to laugh about kids that are having mental health issues and committing suicide. Thank you.
I would just like to comment as a father with 4 school-aged kids right now. 2 go to public school, 2 go to private school. Gives me a little bit of a different perspective, but you know, a lot of things, a lot of problems that society has ends up in our schools. And it's not necessarily the school's fault all the way. You know, sometimes it's, I think, largely a parent problem. You know, it's not all the schools. Because I think the primary duty of a parent is to train up a child in the way it should go. And right? And so it's the parents' duty to educate their children. Now, schools come alongside us to help support us. I mean, we live in this modern day world. It takes 2 to 3 jobs in a household to make it ends meet sometimes, especially for those of us with larger families, and it's a huge burden. So I don't want that to be lost in the conversation as well, but I do think Representative Hill is right that, you know, cell phones and technology, there's a lot of good with it, but then there's a lot of baggage that comes with it too, and I think the studies are showing and indicating that there's a lot of negatives to it as well. I remember when USD 305 decided they were going to give, I can't remember at what age, but Chromebooks out to everybody. And if anybody's ever been to that room over in Hegeman School where they have the technology offices, you walk into there and all you see is stacks of these Chromebooks about 8 feet high, and from here to that wall, I mean, it kind of hits you then how much is out there in our classroom. So I think we need to reevaluate some of these things and maybe go back to the basics: reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we don't have to overcomplicate it. And if there's things that we're doing at the state level that's making it too complicated or restrictive, we need to know what those are so we can make some changes so school districts can govern in a more responsible way.
I'm going to build upon that because this question actually ties in with the fundamentals that you were just mentioning in school: reading, writing, arithmetic. This question asks the question, if reading and literacy is so important, why did you cut the reading program in the new state budget?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Well, I think, first of all, the Blueprint for Literacy program last year cost us $6 million and didn't result in a single student learning to read. So when you talk about government waste, that's one of the first places you can look at. Are these resources really being directed? Are they really being directed to where they need to be? And we have educated teachers. We've paid scholarships for teachers to learn the science of reading is the term that's being used. It is phonetic awareness, folks. It is understanding that words are connected by phonetic sounds. And, you know, this is basically going back to a basic type of reading instruction that we had 50 years ago. There's some modifications to it. It's not exactly the same, but it is phonetic awareness and looking at it from a systematic approach. And, you know, I'll talk just a little bit about reading because the question actually asks that. And you know, before we had the science of reading, we had whole language. And does anybody know what that is? It's that you learn to read by looking at words, and if you don't know the words, you kind of estimate what they are, and you read through. And did kids learn to read that way? And the truth is, kids learn to read that way. A certain percentage of kids learn to read very well that way. I would probably be one of them. I tend to read that way. I look at words, I skip over words, I read very fast, okay? And so that would have been right down my alley. But what we have found is that the low-performing reader, not the high-performing reader, but the low-performing reader needs the structure of understanding phonetic sounds. Now, I will say the same thing is absolutely true of mathematics and science and history. We have tried to develop our school system so that, and I remember this when I was on the State Board of Education, the nasty word was rote memorization. We shouldn't expect our children to rote memorize things. You know, and particularly with technology in our lives, we don't need to memorize anything anymore, right? The computer's right there and we just type it in and artificial intelligence will give us whatever we need. What we have found is that's an absolutely flawed concept. And one of the reasons it's a flawed concept is you have to have information in your brain to think about. You don't just think on nothing. So you can feel really good about what you know, but if you don't know anything, it doesn't help you. And so content-rich information instruction is critically important for our schools. And the quicker we get there, the quicker we will start to turn around what has been a decline. And you can look at any measure you want to. We have gone from one of the top 10 education states in the country back around 2000, in that neighborhood. On any measure that you use, we would be in the top 10 on reading, we'd be in the top 10 on mathematics. The NAEP assessments showed that. ACT scores showed that. Right now, we're sitting from 30 to 40. You know, we can stick our heads in the sand and say we're doing a wonderful job because we're spending a lot of money and we're employing a lot of teachers. Or we can look at it and say we need to do something different. And I'm of the mindset that we need to do something different before we're number 50 in the country.
I know we're winding down on time, and I don't know what time limit you guys signed up for tonight, but we're going to be finished here in about 15 minutes, so I've got a few other questions. This one, I guess the best way to ask this would be, do you recognize the separation of church and state in your legislating decisions? The question has to do with there appears to be some leaning towards specific religious groups' pressure. Do you recognize the separation of church and state?
So I'm going to recommend that book again, Scalia Speaks. I just saw a lady walk by and she's talking, her shirt says, "Resist like it's 1938 in Germany." Oh, you know what? The whole audience should be applauding because he talks about our Constitution and how the words are being changed and the language, the definition of the words are being used to what it is now. Well, the word cool, let's take it. If you would have taken it generations ago, cool, what did that mean? Oh, cooler than, temperature. Now, what does it mean? Well, it depends on the context. So if we do that with our Constitution and how it was written, where do you think we're going to land? And Scalia brings up the fact that we could end up, because this is what happened in Germany with their when their court system tried to change the definition of words and use different language to interpret their Constitution. So yes, we need to be more aware and fight like it is Germany. The whole room should be fighting to defend our Constitution. And our Constitution, if you look at it, it doesn't separate religion. It doesn't say do not use your foundation, your religion, your basis for where we are for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our founding fathers based that Constitution, our U.S. Constitution, on their principles and their religion. They did not put it in because they did not want to pick one religion over the other. But that is our foundation, is trusting in God. That is who we are, the United States of America. God bless America.
I would just say that, as the Senator explained, there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that talks about a wall of separation. That dates back to a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist, and he was trying to make a point that I think is, in modern day terms, been taken out of context. Back then, there were state-run sanctioned religion, and I think we all can agree that we don't want that. Now, does that mean you as an individual, as a public servant, have to put down your faith at the door before going into the House chamber? No. No, it doesn't. So I think there's some misunderstanding of what that was meant back in those times and what it means for us today.
The question was, do I believe in the separation of church and state? And as the good representative from Salina said, that comes from a letter by Thomas Jefferson, I believe it was, right? And what he was saying in that letter, I absolutely believe in. The state should not be like it is in Europe. The state should not be like it was in Germany in 1938 and saying, you will worship this way. Your tax dollars will go to support this church. And that's the way Europe is still to this day. And you have to understand, most of our founding fathers came from England. Okay? The mandated church was the Church of England. Your tax dollars went to support the Church of England. And they were adamant against that. Adamant. And so when you look at the Bill of Rights and it says, there shall be no establishment of a religion, that's what they're talking about. Okay? Also, the Bill of Rights says something else kind of interesting, doesn't it? It says you have the right to free speech. And as a legislator, you do not give up your right to free speech. You have the right to speak your mind based on your experience, your belief system. And I want to give you an example. My first 2 years that I served in the legislature, I sat on the floor. The only representative that can make this claim. I sat next to a Democrat on the floor. You know, we got along great. Really did. I consider him a good friend. Okay? He is also a pastor. He interpreted the Bible in a way very different from the way I interpreted the Bible. We both relied heavily on the Bible in our lives. He voted, I told him after the first year, I said, we need to switch voting boxes because you vote always opposite I do and we're wearing out different buttons. But Did he need to have a separation of church and state in his life? You know, the left-leaning people would say, no, he's voting his conscience. He's voting what the Bible tells him. But right-leaning people that interpret Scripture different have the same right of free speech. And if we don't protect the right of free speech to those we like, how can we expect to protect it for those we don't like? So we need to protect the right of free speech for everybody. It's absolutely critical. It is one of the most important Bill of Rights that we have. It's true.
The difference in governing and free speech.
It's true.
So, I teach in the Homeland Security program at Wichita State, but I'm an historian, and it's a long story how I ended up in the Homeland Security program. I won't bore you with, but I did my PhD in history at K-State and in American history. And I think that sometimes because we grew up in this country, we don't appreciate just how unique and special what we have is. There has never been a country like the United States, a nation like the United States. So for all of recorded history and a lot of history before it got recorded, before the United States, being a nation meant that you had the same ethnicity, you spoke the same language, and you worshipped in the same way. You had the same religion. And that was a nation. And those folks that looked different or worshipped a different way or spoke a different language over there, they were a different nation. And that's how you defined a nation. America is unique in all of human history because we're a nation, but we all speak different languages at home and came from different places, and we all worship in a different way, and we all look different. What makes us a nation, and this is unique, it's never happened anywhere on this planet before. What makes us a nation is that we all swear and we all believe in a common set of principles. We believe that we're all equal under the law. Whether no matter what station you have, no matter how much you make, no matter how much you have, we're all equal under the law, and that we all are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which meant property, but they didn't want to put that in the Constitution because they didn't want to, they're afraid that the slavers would use that to hang on to slavery. That is precious. And it's centered on God. Because government didn't give you those rights. Your neighbor didn't give you those rights. God gave you those rights. And no government can take it away, including ours. And in fact, the Constitution, which follows the Declaration of Independence, makes it clear that it's the job of government to protect those rights. And we got a whole Bill of Rights to be specific, to say all the ways that the government's not allowed to infringe on your rights. What we deal with in the legislature, and I was telling somebody before this, I campaigned for the Value in the Both Amendment. I had the Kansas City Temple of Satan protesting my restaurant. No kidding. They came out and they know me by name. So when we had the Rally for Life at the Capitol, they knew me by name, and I'm like, please don't call me by name. But that's their right. But I think that it's very, very telling that the political divide that has developed in our country is between the people that believe that our rights come from God and that God is in control. However you understand that God. I'm a Christian, I'm a Baptist, I understand God in a certain way. But if you're a Muslim, if you're a Jew, you may understand God in a different way. But God is in control, and a growing, very vocal, but still minority group in this country that believe that they're God. They, as an individual, are God, and there is nobody over them. And a lot of the battles that we end up fighting in the legislature revolve around who's in control. Is God in control, or can a person decide what gender they are? Or can a person decide to kill another person because it's inconvenient for them? A lot of our battles revolve around, is there a God or not? And I would contend, I agree with everything that all my fellow legislators said about what the Establishment Clause actually meant. But I would contend that if we don't walk in that building with our core beliefs and our faith that God is in control, not us. If we don't walk in the building with that core center, we're going to lose that precious, unique thing in world history that our founders gave us.
Don't look at that clock. We are out of time for this evening. I appreciate the fact that we had different perspectives and different questions from different sides. I think that's what makes us, again, unique as Americans, that we can discuss that. If I could bring it full circle, something I think we can all agree on. Monday is Memorial Day, and we need to make sure we commemorate those who gave their life for the freedoms that we do enjoy here in this country. And I love America, good, bad, ugly, whatever. I love our country. And for those of you who have served in the military, thank you. For those of you who have family members who have given their life for our freedoms, we owe you an immense debt of gratitude. And so thank you to all of those who have served. And yes, I do believe that deserves a round of applause.
I did forget to mention tonight that Clark Sanders was supposed to be here, but he had to go to Illinois for a family matter. So we hope that Clark's endeavor takes care of things. You want closing statements from each one of you, and then we'll...
Thank you, all of you, for being here. What we'll do is we'll let you have one summarization if you want, and everybody's paying attention right now. So now is the time to get all of that in. I believe, did we start with you to begin with? Would you defer to Ms. Tyson on the end, Ms. Senator, and we'll let Ms. Tyson begin.
Thank you. Well, I do want to thank you guys for being here. It's been interesting to watch the different dynamics, the actions, the reactions to the comments. That's how we get feedback. That makes us better legislators. So I enjoyed the questions. One thing that I did, was remiss talking about, I have fought, I worked with a Democrat, he called me up, he said, Caryn, I want to freeze property tax for seniors. I said, okay, if you'll add disabled veterans to that, I'll be glad, I'll help you. We'll get it done. And so we started it in the Senate, and we worked on it, and we got it passed, and we fought it. Leadership fought us. I mean, it took years. And thankfully, Adam Smith from the House agreed to accept the Senate position to establish a program for seniors and disabled veterans that freezes your property taxes if you meet certain parameters. Since we got that into law in 2001, we have been 2021, we have been trying to expand that program. And we did get a little bit of an expansion this year, not as much as we had passed in the Senate, but we did get it passed that we increase the income limit. So more people will qualify, so your Social Security won't count against your income for it. So if you have any questions, please let us know. One of the problems is you do have to have that application in by April 15th every year. So it is due when you file your taxes, but please look into it. See if you qualify. There's been people that have lied about me, said that I have not worked on freezing property taxes. They said that they're the champion of it. That's not even close to true. And I want you to know that I am up there fighting with my colleagues, and you are very blessed to have Representative Howe and Hill and others from this area, J.R. Clays and others that fight very diligent for you in the Kansas legislature. And I appreciate your time and allowing me to be here this evening. Thank you. Granny Brigade, keep fighting the good fight.
So thank you very much for inviting me to this. It's been a great conversation. It's an honor to serve you as a state representative and as the chairman of your elections committee. I've had the chance as the chairman of the elections committee to go all over the state and visit with clerks, county clerks, including Jamie Doss here. You guys are a great clerk. You got a great elections office. I can't think of a clerk I've talked to that isn't a great public servant, getting paid way too little to do way too much work, and really conscientious about securing our elections. I'll just end where I began. It's vitally important that we restore confidence in our elections. You know, I did spend 25 years in the Army. I spent 2 tours in Iraq. I spent 1 in Afghanistan. I've seen what it looks like when people lose confidence in their country, as we were talking about a minute ago, about our nation, and when they lose confidence in civil processes. They pick up guns and they start shooting each other over their differences instead of settling them in a ballot box and settle them through civil processes. And we've got a great window of opportunity for the folks in that part of the room. Our guy won in 2024, so a lot of people that had quit on the process are willing to hear a conversation again. And we have an opportunity to bring a lot of folks that have been sitting out since 2020 back into the process. But I really do believe it's vitally important that we have the right person in the Secretary of State's office restoring confidence and not using it as a weapon to advance their political careers by tearing it down. And there's a lot of folks that are talking about running for the Secretary of State's office, which is really what caused me to decide to throw my hat in the ring. I'd be honored to have your vote for that. And in the meantime, if you have concerns about elections, please get with me afterwards. I'll give you my email. I'll invite you to the committee to come talk to us about your concerns, because I really do believe it's time that we had a conversation instead of a shout match, and we bring everybody back to the process and restore confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for coming to Salina. You have my vote and full support. I'll follow your lead in battle any day. And your commitment not only to our country, but to those who serve in the legislature has been inspiring. And so I want to thank you for that. Just in closing, I want to make a few points about the budget and trying to reduce the budget. What we've done just this last year is slow the rate of state spending. So when you talk about cuts, I don't know if they're true cuts, but we're slowing the growth of spending, and we're taking on a different attitude, and we're going, as a legislature, starting the process early. We're going to learn more about our state government, so hopefully we can make some efficiencies. I wanted to make one point about Medicaid expansion. It's hard to put a lot of faith in Medicaid expansion just for the simple fact that in the 1970s, the federal government enacted legislation to integrate people with disabilities into our schools. And the federal government mandated these things on the states, which then in turn mandated down to the local school districts to provide these services. Well, they've never lived up to their end of the bargain to fund up to 40 cents per dollar on those special education services. I think the federal government contributes maybe about 15% of our obligation. And, that's not meeting the mark. So it's hard to put a lot of faith in the federal government that has kind of left the states hanging to pick up the tab. Also on spending, you have Republican spending and Democrat spending. And it's not necessarily a partisan issue, but I do see a problem with earmarks. There's still earmarks getting inserted into the budget bill late in the process, and that is frustrating. But we're making some headway in limiting some of those provisos and extra, I guess people would call it special interest spending or pork barrel spending, earmark spending, and things like that. So we're changing the culture. And the other thing about spending is corporate welfare. There's a lot of corporate welfare, and it comes in the form of economic development tools. And you saw that happen a couple years ago when we were told, we've got a deal for you, Kansas legislature, but you just need to sign on. We can't tell you what company it's for, we can't tell you what industry it's for or where it's located, but hey, we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get a huge investment into our state, to bring jobs to our state. Well, that turned out to be Panasonic. And if you know anything about Panasonic, they're a highly successful company, multinational company from Japan, make billions and billions of dollars each year. But they basically had us in a horse race between Oklahoma, trying to play us off each other. And so over 9 years, we're going to be paying them $1.2 billion. They did build an electric vehicle battery plant in DeSoto. I don't think it's fully operational yet, but hey, here in Salina, Kansas, for 50 years, we've had a battery plant here, a lead acid battery plant. Did you know they recycle nearly 100% of the lead in those batteries? But what are they going to do with all those lithium batteries? Well, they're going to end up in the landfill, because I don't think they have a plan to recycle those. So we've got to look at things critically and hopefully make some good decisions as we move forward. We're an imperfect legislature, but you guys give us a lot of grace, and it's an honor to be able to serve you as your state legislator from the 71st District. Thank you.
Well, since I get to go last, I want to thank the Grannies. I mean, the opportunity to speak to this large of a group of people. And I really want to thank the group of people that are here, that took the time out of their evening to come here, ask questions, were civil. Everybody participated by the rules, gave us a great array of questions to talk about. This is our process. This is why our country has survived, has had moments of tragedy, has had moments of grand glory, and it's why we will continue to survive. And so thank you, each of you, to get involved in the process. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for pinning legislators down, making us answer difficult questions. I enjoyed the dialogue. I enjoyed the dialogue with people I agree with, and I enjoyed the dialogue with people I disagree with. I enjoyed the dialogue of how do we make our country better. And each one of, well, we have one empty chair now. Yeah, but each one of us here are about making our country greater. And we chose to serve, and we chose to continue to serve because we believe in our country, we believe in our state, and we believe in the people that live in this state, which is you guys. So thank you so much for showing up, and thank you, Grannies, for having us.
Thank you all for coming, and for those that are capable and willing, would like to have you all put the chairs back up on our racks if you can. And don't forget our meeting next month, and it is on sex and human trafficking, and I would encourage all of you to come and listen to that border control. Thank you.